Hi, welcome to John Box Watercolor. Today is going to be all about painting reflections and how one simple tool can make this process a whole lot easier. As always, if you wouldn't mind giving this video a thumbs up, it really helps the channel and bring this content to more people. And if you like what you see, consider subscribing. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as mentioned, today is going to be all about reflections. Specifically, we're going to be working on a cityscape rainy reflection scene, and our setting for today is Paris, France. Here we're looking at the Arc de Triomphe. I'll put the reference photo over on the right just so you can take a look briefly. I really just used the reference photo for the architecture itself. I kind of moved things around, and then I added cars and people as I normally do. So let's go ahead and get started. This is going to be a rainy day, so I've got a little bit of a technique for getting sort of a stormy kind of overcast sky. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take some dirty water and I'm just going to sort of randomly spread it around the top part of my painting here. And what that's going to allow me to do is, as I start to enter some different sky colors here, I'm going to mix up just kind of a gray. It's going to let the watercolor have some soft and hard edges, which is really nice for getting those sort of dynamic, stormy, overcast scenes here. And I'm really just letting watercolor do the work for me here. And again, you want to make sure to leave some gaps. Let that watercolor kind of spread out and do its own thing. And what I'm going to do is, you see we've got this mixture of sort of some hard edges surrounded by white and then some softer areas. I want to soften up some of these hard areas here. And so what I'll do is I'll just kind of pull that paper towel and just soften up some of those edges a little bit. And it'll help give that impression of clouds and maybe the sun kind of breaking through a storm, something along those lines. And I may add just a little bit of some dark paint in there, kind of underneath some of those areas of light, almost like a shadow. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. All right, we're going to leave that alone. And I'm going to come down here just to kind of get closer to my scene where the action is going to be happening. And let's work down here at the bottom now. I'm going to mix up a fairly dark color. We'll keep it, let's warm it up a little bit. Let's get a little contrast going here. Let me scoot that over. Yeah, something pretty dark. As I work my way up, I'm just going to grab a little water. So I kind of get this nice transition of light to dark there. And now I'm going to just simply let the watercolor from the sky, that paint, meet the road. And we're just going to let it sort of blend together. Just something right like that. Very easy. I'm going to darken it up down here just a little bit. All right, perfect. Okay, let's let this dry. And we're going to come back and start working on our figures and architecture in here. All right, we're back. This is completely dry. And we're going to start working on some architecture and some details here. Now, I will say something so far I'm already a little concerned about is I think our sky got a little bit too blue. I think I used a little bit too much cobalt, and so it almost has a sunny feel, which I'm not super liking right now, just because, again, we're doing sort of a rainy day, but we're going to go with it. It might just be right after a rainstorm, the sun's starting to come through, and we've got these nice reflections. So we're gonna make it work. I don't ever want to really, after a wash has dried, come back and try to fix things. It's really only when your paper is wet that you can adjust things. So I'm gonna leave it alone. A lot of beginners might come in here and try to darken things up, and it just creates a mess. So we're gonna leave it alone. We're gonna trust that everything's gonna be okay. I'm gonna spray some water on my paper just to get it moist. And we're gonna start with our main kind of piece here, and that's this Arc de Triomphe. Very iconic Parisian piece of architecture. And I just want to mix up something nice and dark to contrast. And I did spray a little more water than I normally would do on the page. And really, that's just to try and soften up some of the edges on this, because again, I'm going for that rainy day feel. And so there might be some kind of fog or haze in the air. So I'm okay if it softens around the edges a little bit. Let's work our way down here. I'm using my Raphael Soft Aqua brush here. I'm not sure of the size. After a while, the lettering where they have the size and the model and everything starts to rub off. Eventually I'm going to be doing a video on all my brushes and their sizes and whatnot, so stay tuned for that. All right, I'm really liking the look at this. It's nice and soft, but still bold enough to give us that contrast against the sky. The only thing I'm thinking about here, though, is that it is, it's a weird thing to think about, but I like the way this looks, and that concerns me because I know this is going to dry lighter. So I may want to darken this up a bit. All right. It's looking okay. Let's do a little darkening here. I'm going to grab some darker pigment. I always like to throw darker pigment along the tops and bottoms. It just helps really silhouette it against the sky. I'll just draw a couple of details. These will soften out. You probably won't even be able to see them. Something like that. Get something warm in there. Maybe something like that. All right. Now there's some trees and foliage, some kind of buildings and things. We're going to be abstracting a lot of this. I want the main sort of subject of what's going on here to be the figures and the reflections that those shapes are going to be creating. So let's grab a little water. I'm going to soften that area. We'll just kind of choose a few areas to mix up, get a mixture of soft and hard edges. And as I mentioned too, there is some foliage kind of on the edges here. And I'm just gonna abstract a little of that in. All right, let's get some really dark paint here. We're gonna build a nice silhouette for these car windshields that I left out. We can sort of start to build around some of our people as well. And this one needs to be very strong. Something like that. Yeah. And you'll see most of this I'm just abstracting along. You don't want to overcomplicate things. Using the side of my brush to create some of that foliage there. I want to sharpen the line on the top of this windshield. Whenever you're doing negative painting, you want to really try to keep it as sharp as you possibly can. I think that looks nice. let's come in here and add a few little dark details on the top of this area. Yeah, just something like that. Okay, this is starting to come along very nicely. Let's work on these cars here. Let's grab some yellow ochre. I always like to use yellow ochre for my cars. It's a fantastic taxi color. We're going to go straight out of the pale there. Now come right in, grab some neutral tint. That's going to be always your basic recipe for your vehicles, is going to be a solid color and then a darker bottom. Makes your life a lot easier. You want to use a lot of pigment as well. All right, let's get something cooler. No, we'll go warmer. I'm just taking what the watercolor gives me here. Again, same thing. You got a stripe of color and then you simply lay on that darker bottom half. And this one we will cool down. Got one more kind of car in the scene here. Grab neutral tint and throw it on the bottom. And that really is the secret to Impressionism. I think people are always amazed when they look at the final product of, you know, how things look, but Impressionism is what I like to call lazy painting. It's all about how can I get the most realistic impression with the least amount of work. And you'll start to realize that every object kind of has its own little formula to how it can be produced in a very effective way. So that's the simplest way to do cars. All right. Now let's work on our people here a little bit. And I'm a little concerned. It's a brighter painting than I was hoping for, but I'm okay with that. That's sometimes the fun part of painting, is you don't always end up with exactly what you were going for, but sometimes that can be a very good thing. I made a little lavender there for the body. Throw in some neutral tint. And again, just the indication of legs. I do not want to have these perfect sticks coming down. I want to have them, the edges broken. It's going to help us with the reflections later, but it helps give movement to your figures. Lets the eye fill things in. The eye is always going to be a better painter than your brush. All right. Throwing a jacket on here. And then same story. I want to have those broken legs there. There we go. Let's get something warmer over there. I feel like we've got too much cool going on. Do a nice warmer figure. Okay, that looks pretty nice. We've got one more left over here. What I'd like to do, let's grab some Chinese white. It's always hard for you to see on camera. It's the paint that's furthest away on screen. I'll just kind of have a grayish figure there, and I may do some overalls or something on this figure, just because they're a bit closer. I want to add a little bit more interest. All right, let's add some faces. Got my burnt sienna. Let me throw some hands here. Okay. This is looking pretty good. A good start to what we've got going on. I'm gonna grab my palette brush, my palette knife, excuse me. I'll just do a couple of vertical lines. Something like that. Okay, let's let this dry, and then we're gonna come in here really hard and aggressive. We're gonna hit our reflections, and I'm gonna share the secret tool that makes reflections a whole lot easier. All right, we are back and ready to get into the reflections, which is kind of the meat and potatoes of this video. So step one, and I also want to clarify, these are for sort of rainy day street reflections. For water reflections, I do that a little bit differently, and I'll have a video later on that subject. But when we're talking about street reflections, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some water. And I'm going to spread it out over the bottom of our foreground here. And I'm going to leave a few areas where there's no water. But basically, we're just giving our paint somewhere where it can run. Now, there's going to be 2 stages to the reflections in this scene. Just because we have sort of a background reflection, which is going to come from the Arc de Triomphe. And then we have our figures and cars. So I'm going to mix up something fairly dark. I'm going to keep it on the cooler side. We'll warm that up just a little bit. And this is one of those things where you kind of got to go for it. And I'm going to try to mark where the Arc de Triomphe would be reflecting on our paper here. Pull some there. And I'm going a little bit lighter with this reflection just because I need the reflections of our figures to sort of permeate over the top here. All right. So I would say something like that. And this kind of pulls me into the tool that I was referring to. It's a very famous tool, very hard to come by, and it is the Humble paper towel. Now, this has a lot of uses in watercolor, and it's really useful for reflections. And I'm going to show you how we're going to use this. Reflections they come down to 2 key factors. Comes down to soft edges and retention of light. And so if you look right here, I want to have light coming in this area, and the paint has started to spread over, and that's fine because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that down and drag it. And what you get are these beautiful, very soft edges. And that's what we're going to be using for these figures. It's going to become more apparent how useful this is here when we do our figures. Now, I need to mix up something pretty dark. And we're going to keep it cool to neutral. And this is one of those things where you got to go for it, and it either works or it doesn't. Okay. Let's put some under the car here. And grab a little bit more water. Pull that down. I'm going to show you how useful this paper towel is. Let's do the same thing here. We've got these cars in the background. I'm pulling those down. And again, with reflections, you just want to focus on pulling straight down the paper here. Now, I'm going to warm up the one for this car over here a little bit, just because the car itself is a bit warmer. And I want to have that little bit of variation. All right, let's just work on that. You're going to see where this becomes really useful here in just a second. All right. So we've got kind of our main structure here for our reflections. And what a paper towel is just fantastic for is maintaining light between objects. And what I mean by that is, you see how I've got a figure here and I've got a car next to it, but the colors have kind of bled together. I want to maintain that light and get that glimpse of light kind of cutting through there. And that's what this is so useful for. Same thing for these cars here. I'm just going to pull that straight down. You see how it splits and gives that, it's just a much cleaner effect. Now I need to soften some of these up here. This kind of dried while we were talking, but that's fine because again, I've got this paper towel and it's going to really help. So if I want to maintain light between those two figures, I can just pull it straight down the page and it gets a fantastic impression of reflections. I'm going to do the same thing as we're looking at these two figures here. Pull that straight down. And you can see it's a lot more powerful than you would expect. It is a fantastic way to get these very, very soft impressions. Now, I'm going to mix this up here. I want to kind of pull in where the I guess arch is here. I want to have a little bit more of that darkness down at the bottom of the page, and I'm just squinting here, and I'm just going to keep working that paper towel as I'll do a pass, and you'll see they start to bleed back together. And I'll do another pass, and I'll just keep making sure that I'm maintaining that light between the objects that I'm trying to create reflections for. And it helps too to use different parts of the paper towel. You want to use drier areas, some wetter areas. This is starting to come along very nicely. But you see, it's a really simple process. You just kind of have to sort of babysit this and watch it dry. I'm just kind of softening that a little bit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a flat brush, a little bit of that dark paint, and I'm just going to kind of blend the bottom here. And I'll come back, I'll pick a few areas where I want to maintain that separation. Okay. Now, this is a really nice effect. If you want to do some perspective lines, it really helps give that sort of feeling of having a wet road and the reflections being on top of that road. It's a really, really nice effect. Again, I'm just going to let this sit here, squinting my eyes. Do the values make sense? I need a little bit more of a dry paper towel. I wish I had another one. It's definitely good to keep a couple on hand. But yeah, this is my secret tool for doing these reflections on a street. I think this looks nice. So I'm going to let this dry. We're going to come back and finish this painting up. All right, here we are. Let's finish this painting up. This is now completely dry. So that means our reflections are all kind of set in where they are. And let's start. Let's see here. I mentioned earlier, I wanted to maybe make this figure a little more interesting over here. I'm going to, let's do like a red, an apron of some kind I think might be fun. I'm going to pull some red over here. I'll grab a little Chinese white just to kind of give it a little opacity. Let's see here. Let's do some kind of shoulders there. I'm just going to pull it straight down. always look to mix up what your figures are wearing. I'm not always the best about that, but it really helps give a little bit more interest into what you're doing if you can just mix things up. Everybody likes a little variety. I'm just grabbing some fresh paint for a few of these folks. All right. I'd make a few dark figures and things that just in the background kind of fill things up. And again, that's the best thing you can do with watercolors. Just appreciate and understand that almost anything can be abstracted. And it's going to be okay. All right. That looks good. Let's grab some gouache here. This is my white titanium gouache, as always. We're going to add some headlights on cars. That's what's going to kind of bring everything together. You could also make the decision not to throw the kind of silhouette highlights on these folks, just because it is meant to be a gloomier day, but I did not get it as dark as I had hoped. I'm going to do a little bit in the body of this guy, and we'll just use our finger, kind of wipe it, give it more of a jacket vibe. Let's do just a vertical line. All right, let's see if we want to add some details here. I do want to add just a few vertical lines in the background here. They could be light poles. I need some paints a little bit more moist. It could be light poles, tree limbs, flag poles. All kinds of things. I just like a few vertical lines in my scenes typically. And you know what we may do? It might be a little bit cheesy, but I'm going to throw a French flag here. And you'll have to forgive me if this is wrong. I can never remember if it's blue on top and then red, which I think it is. I hope it is. Let's see. Whenever you want to do a flag like this, just leave the center of it blank, and it'll give a much better impression. The more you can let your viewer's eye fill in aspects of your painting, I think the better it turns out. I think that's nice without being too cheesy. All right. Last thing I want to do, we're going to take a look at maybe doing a little bit of dry brush work. Just something like that. I don't want to overdo it. Just remember that when you do dry brush work, it will always pull your items forward. And so if you're trying to keep something sort of subdued in the background, you just have to be careful with that. I don't think that overdoes it. I think it just, what we're doing here, I think that just gives it a little texture. Okay, I think that looks nice. So let's sign it and let's talk about it. First thing I don't like about the painting is that sky got a little bright on us. I should have used some more grays, some darker colors in there, but that's okay. I still think it came out nice. I don't dislike the painting. It's just something I would have done different given the opportunity to go back. I think our reflections look nice. I think our figures look nice for the most part. I needed to be more careful when I was wetting the paper for this figure because he's got this weird kind of like halo around him, and that could be better. I think our architecture here, the Arc de Triomphe, looks fantastic. Really like the way it looks. And overall, like I said, I'm pleased with the painting. So if you stuck around to the end, I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something. I hope you will give this sort of paper towel trick a try on your next reflection or cityscapes that you're working on. And as always, remember to keep on painting. Thanks.